We talked about this last time, the public health model for prevention. They see addiction as a disease. The other organization that sees addiction as a disease is AA. And for this reason, it kind of exonerates the person from all the horrible things that they did while they were drinking, which kind of irritates me a little bit. The user is a genetically predisposed host. The environment contributes to the problem. The drug is introduced, causing the disease. Prevention involves disrupting the relationship between one or more of these factors, and that is the public health model. The family approach, this approach sees addiction stemming from family dynamics. Families are bolstered through family support, skills training, therapy, preventing programs. This approach focuses on the family rather than the environment. Supply reduction seeks to decrease drug abuse by reducing the availability of drugs and is the responsibility of everybody. It's the responsibility of state and local police departments, the feds, Department of Justice, FBI, Bureau of Prisons, the Immigration Naturalization Service, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Treasury Department. Under the Treasury Department, you have alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. You have the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, and then the customs people. Department of Transportation is also involved in controlling drugs, as is the Department of Defense. However, the Department of Defense cannot operate in the United States. It's one of the reasons why we don't send troops. That's why when Trump wanted to send troops to the border, they couldn't be armed. They are armed, of course, but they can't do any law enforcement. That is against the law. And the reason is because we don't want to send an army out to the Arizona border who decides, well, I think we should overthrow the government. And then, of course, they start marching their way to Washington. We don't want that. So it's against the law to have an operating completely operating military organization in the United States. The troops that they did send down to Arizona, the border of Arizona, Texas, and New Mexico, and theoretically California, but California hasn't complied yet. Those troops, for one thing, they can't do any law enforcement. What's the other thing? They're not allowed to do just a bunch of things. Most of them aren't armed. All they can do is surveillance. That's all they can do. It's not, theoretically, it's not a military group. Responsible agencies reduce drug supplies by interdicting drug smugglers, by manning law enforcement activities at border crossings, limiting the supply of precursor chemicals. And the precursor chemicals we're primarily talking about is pseudoephedrine, which is the substance that is used in crystal meth manufacturing. What other chemicals do they have? Ammonia, liquid ammonia. That's not right. Yes, it is. Ammonia fertilizer. What else do they use? They use red phosphorus is another substance that they use. So potentially we try to control all of those chemicals, disrupting criminal gangs and organized crime, passing more severe laws, increasing community police officers. This is what they did up on the Fort Belknap Reservation. We're having a really serious problem with crystal meth. So what they did, they increased the number of police officers. Didn't really work. In order to take care of the situation, they had to send in the BIA law enforcement. Yeah, because the local police were tainted, and that was the problem. They weren't arresting relatives, for example, which makes a lot of sense. So what they did, they brought the BIA and the BIA law enforcement, and they actually do have a law enforcement arm, and they were not from the local area. Because of that, of course, people were complaining that, geez, I used to drive 70 miles an hour on this road all the time, and nobody ever did anything. You must be picking on me. Obviously, you Navajos don't really understand how we do things up here, that kind of stuff. they replaced the law enforcement on Rocky Boy, which is on one side of Havre and Fort Belknap on the other. But they replaced their law enforcement with DIA law enforcement. And they were there for, 2 or 3 years before they finally found somebody that was willing to do law enforcement that wasn't family related. And of course, you know, if and it's one thing to allow your relatives to get away with stuff, but it's another thing to allow your relatives to supply the reservation with drugs. You know, that's just maybe going a little bit too far. Nobody cares if you don't give that guy a speeding ticket; it's not that big a deal. But allowing this guy to supply the entire reservation with crystal meth, that just doesn't make any sense. And that's what they were running into up there. Anyway, so they had to increasing community police officers, disrupting money laundering and seizing assets. And this is usually how they actually catch the individuals, is by following the money. It's really hard to chase somebody that's got drugs, but there's only one way to launder money, and that is through some kind of an organization. And of course, there has to be accounting that takes place, and that's where they catch them. They don't chase after the guy that's supplying the drugs. What they do is they catch the guy when they try to do something with the money. Supporting local and state police in high-volume drug areas, supporting anti-drug efforts of foreign countries, and of course that's what we have done in the United States since Ronald Reagan. We've supported drug control in Venezuela, Colombia, and other countries. Enacting treaties to work towards supply reduction, and of course that's what we have done in Mexico, that's what we have done in Colombia. Drug laws in the United States have evolved to curtail the supply and use of illicit drugs. Long prison terms and forfeiture of assets have been used to discourage suppliers and manufacturers of drugs. Users are discouraged by facing stiffer and increased jail time, and possession of paraphernalia adds to the length of time spent in jail. One of the problems that we've had in the United States, especially with the control of marijuana, is that people are complaining that there are too many people in jail. This guy's a user and you send him to jail for 3 years. Well, that's one of the ways that you can control the drug trade, is by giving people longer and stiffer sentences depending on what's going on. The question is, how much marijuana can you smoke? If you've got a trash bag full of marijuana, it's got like 5 or 6 pounds of marijuana. Is that just for you, or are you trying to sell to everybody in the neighborhood? That's the question that we come up with. So what they have done is they have come up with a select amount that each individual can have, and this is also true up in Colorado. This has been a really serious problem up in Colorado. How much can you have for personal use? And the answer is, I don't know, it's 5 plants or a select amount of marijuana. But of course the question is, should we be arresting people that use marijuana? If it's illegal, should we be arresting them and throwing them in jail? And of course that's what everybody thinks. All these individuals that are in jail for smoking marijuana, but in reality, you don't throw somebody in jail for smoking marijuana. You throw them in jail for dealing marijuana. And usually that's what has basically happened. So now that we are decriminalizing marijuana in the United States, and we have 10 states where it's legal, the question is, are we still going to crack down on dealers? And the answer is yes, we are. It has to be a licensed dealer in order for them to market their product. Therefore, we are still trying to crack down on the illegal aspect of it. Alcohol is legal in the United States, but it's against the law to bootleg. It's against the law to manufacture it yourself without a license. It's against the law to manufacture alcohol and sell it without paying taxes on it. That's what a revenue is all about. That's what people are complaining about. So we're going to run into the same thing with marijuana. It's going to increase the amount of people in jail, actually. And this should be a lot of fun. You need to leave, don't you? It's 11 o'clock. Okay. Well, whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay. I won't start crying until after you're gone. I promise. Many states, including California, enacted three-strike laws in the 1980s, which mandated life imprisonment if an individual committed 3 felonies in their lifetime. Since 1980, prison populations have tripled. 55% of the inmates in federal prisons were convicted of drug offenses. If you count felonies committed to support drug habits, the percentage increases to 60 to 80%. Okay, so Tiffany's got a habit, and she needs her drugs. So she comes over to my house, and she steals my television set and sells it to Edison so that she can get her drugs. Now, is that a drug crime or is that robbery? What kind of a crime is that? How do we count that? And that's the question. See, when they talk about these people in jail because of drugs, they're talking about Tiffany stealing my television set. That's really what they're talking about. She's trying to support her habit because she's a drug addict, no offense. But the reality is they count that as a drug law, or a drug crime. So because of that, the people that are in favor of legalizing marijuana are saying that if we legalize marijuana, then Tiffany's not going to steal my television set. Are you still going to steal my television set? No. Sure you will. Of course you will. You still don't have enough money to buy your drugs. What, are they going to start giving it away? Is it going to be cheaper now so Tiffany can afford her drugs? See, that's the argument. And that's why the argument is skewed. Over half of the inmates incarcerated admit to using drugs while they committed their offense. The percentage of teenagers, of course, is even higher because teenagers are stupid. And it's not their fault. Their brains are not mature yet. It's not their fault. So a lot of people will commit a crime and they will actually ruin their lives because they did something stupid when they were a teenager, which is a tragedy if you think about it. But what can we do? Should we just let them go because they're too young to understand? They think they understand. They think they should be able to use as many drugs as they want because it's cool to do that. And the most important thing in the whole wide world is to be cool, isn't it? Isn't it, Tiffany? Isn't that the most important thing in the world, to be cool?
No.
Is it, Edison?
Oh yeah.
You're cool because you wear your cowboy outfit or your cowboy jacket, you got your cowboy hat. Well, not cowboy hat, but your cowboy's hat. And that's what's important, is being cool. That's why I wore my Hawaiian shirt today. To be cool, exactly. I got my new belt buckle. I know. I'm trying to be cool. So you should never arrest somebody just for being cool. I mean, otherwise both of us would be like life sentences for like ever. Wouldn't that be a tragedy? Advocates estimate that it has resulted in 10 to 15% supply reduction. A great deal of money has been spent on supply reduction, but it's only reduced at 10 to 15%. Now the question is that enough? Should we brag about this or should we complain about it? The severe penalties have resulted in a delayed impulse to use. It has opened up treatment. It has kept people in treatment. The best way for us to keep Tiffany from using is to threaten to throw her in jail. Does that work?
Yeah, it works.
Okay, good. Well, we'll do it then. Detractors of the policy complain of the minor impact on supply, and the reality is we're only reducing the supply 10 to 15%. These individuals support a more of a demand reduction approach. They want us to reduce the amount of drugs on the streets to begin with. Demand reduction involves the 3 tiers of prevention. Primary prevention is by promoting abstinence. We will preach to Tiffany not to use drugs. Don't do it. Help young people refuse drugs. We will help her. We will delay the age of first use potentially. If we can delay it until you're 21 years old, then maybe, potentially, we will actually keep you from using drugs or from you becoming addicted to drugs. Encourage healthy non-drug alternatives. I'm not exactly sure what that is. Exercise, I guess, would be a healthy non-drug alternative. The age of first use is the strongest predictor of drug or alcohol use, and that is true for alcohol and drugs.
This is used in a lot of the correctional facilities for those that are incarcerated into the prison system. Once they basically serve their time inside, they go through all of this that you're speaking of, and then when it comes time to come back out, going back into society, it's kind of like a challenge for them. But then again, probably I would say probably 7 out of 10 people will basically come back and we would go through that revolving door and basically get involved with that same consequence and then basically find themselves going back in again.
The problem is it's cool to use drugs, as far as they're concerned, because that's their environment. They would have to remove themselves from that environment in order not to use drugs anymore. And we both know how important it is to be cool. Okay.
Johnny's cool.
Oh, Johnny's cool too? Now that he's taught us everything, he's going to leave. Okay, well thank you for the
I
information.
feel comfortable now that Johnny's here.
Okay, there we go. Individuals who experiment before the age of 12 have a 4 to 5 times likelihood of further drug use. This is the biggest problem. So if we legalize marijuana and we make the age of use 21, that's going to solve all of our problems, right? We don't have to worry about the 12-year-olds getting into mommy and daddy's stash, do we? Should we worry about that?
Yeah, because children, they like to dig around and they're real curious about their parents' belongings. And then especially if they're kind of like, when they kind of get older, then they're going to eventually get into that and see what it's about. So.
Is this a confession? No, you're right. You're absolutely correct. And they want to be adults.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you act like an adult? Well, mommy says that I can't do this until I'm 21 years old. So if I do it today, that means that I'm an adult.
Yeah.
If I start smoking, if I start drinking, if I start doing the things mommy says I can't do now, today, then I'm accelerating the process. This is perfect. So how do we keep the 12-year-olds from smoking pot? I mean, alcohol is one thing. Alcohol clears your system in a day. It clears your system in 24 to 36 hours. But marijuana stays in your system for 28 days. And it messes up your brain. I mean, it restructures your brain. Alcohol does too, but marijuana restructures your memory. So how in the world do we keep the 12-year-olds from getting into their mommy and daddy stash? Since it's an adult thing to do. Only mommy and daddy can do this. There are things that only adults can do. One of them is have sex, but we're not even thinking about that. We're talking about smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, and smoking pot. So how do we keep the 12-year-old out of the mommy and daddy stash? Who's the one person that can keep them out of the stash? Mommy and daddy. And if mommy and daddy do it, they think it's cool. How many times have I read in somebody's paper or in a discussion that everybody in the family drinks, or everybody in the family uses? So then I started doing it, but then I decided to stop. But I had to go against the family. I mean, I've heard this over and over and over again. So how do we stop that 12-year-old? Because when it's concerning alcohol, you get drunk today and you're okay in a couple days. You have a hangover tomorrow, then the next day you're pretty much back to normal. But with marijuana, it messes up your short-term memory. And it messes it up for at least 3 days. And it stays in your system for at least 28 days. Now we got a really serious problem. So can we legislate that 12-year-olds can't use marijuana? We can legislate it, but just like alcohol, they're going to get it. Yeah, and this is a problem. They've always got friends that are cool, and everybody knows it's cool to smoke dope. Okay, so primary prevention is just to talk the kids out of doing it. That's the best way to do it. However, what if they start using drugs? Well, the secondary prevention is halting them from using drugs. This tier of prevention adds intervention to the primary strategies of education and skill building. The biggest problem with this program is denial by the user and their concealment of use, making them difficult to identify. So the reality is that if this is, especially if it's illegal, they're not going to admit that they're using it. Even an alcoholic, if you talk to an alcoholic, this person is drinking themselves to death. And if you go up and you have an intervention and you ask them, you tell them, you're ruining your life, you're ruining the lives of the people around you. You need to stop. What do they tell you? I can stop anytime I want. This is not an addiction. So we get exactly the same thing when we're talking about drugs and marijuana. Another problem with this tier of prevention is that there is a lag phase between first drug use and physical and emotional problems. The user feels that the educational programs are overstated, and they are. Initially, if you have just started using the drug, it doesn't feel like it has control over you. And it's not going to start feeling like it has control over you for 2 or 3 years. So you think it's okay. So by the time that it actually starts taking control of your life, by that time you've been all this propaganda has been thrown at you, and you've been telling everybody this is not true at all. And of course, that is part of the problem. There is a lag phase. So you're not going to admit that you have a problem. And some people stay in this phase for an extended length of time. Tertiary prevention seeks to provide treatment for the user to restore them to health. Compulsive drug use is addressed through group intervention focusing on detoxification, abstinence, and recovery. Cue extinction therapy that desensitizes the user to people, places, and things that trigger their use. It's really kind of interesting if you've ever been in on this stuff. The first thing you need to do is you need to detoxify that person. He has so much of this stuff in his system that he is a walking inebriation. We need to detoxify him. We need to suck all that stuff out of his system. So in order to do that, he has to go through withdrawals. And nobody likes going through withdrawals. It feels like the flu. No matter what it is, whether it's heroin, whether it's marijuana, whether it's alcohol, or even tobacco. And they're going to have a really bad time for about a week, maybe 10 days. And that is the detoxification process. It is miserable. They are horrible to deal with. But we need to get them off of their drugs. We need to get them on the road to recovery. The other thing that we need to do is we need to extinguish the cues that they use to use. So if you've got an individual and every time he drives past the bar, he has to stop and get a drink because that is his cue to go in and start drinking. He goes in and says, I'm just going to have a drink and then I'm going to go home and eat supper. And the next thing he knows, it's 11 o'clock at night and he's plastered. And he can't drive home, but he tries anyway, he wrecks his car, or whatever. Or he gets home and his old lady and his wife tells him, well, you son of a bitch, well, you're drunk again. And when you're drunk, you're mean. And of course, he starts yelling at her and screaming at her and chasing her through the house with a meat cleaver. Or not. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's really sleepy when he gets drunk. So he comes home and falls down on the floor and falls immediately to sleep on the rug. Unfortunately, he fell in a pile of dog manure, right on the side of his face. Okay. You understand what's happening here. Okay. I know. Okay. So what we have to do is we have to extinguish these cues. So every time they see this person, every time they go past this place, they have to use. Remember I told you the story of the young lady from Fort Belknap that every time she went to Great Falls, she had to use because that's where she did it. That's where she used. She actually became a prostitute in Great Falls. So anytime she got anywhere close to Great Falls, she felt like using. And she would do anything to get her fix. And in the past, she had prostituted herself in order to get her fix. So when her father was sick and they sent him to Great Falls, what's going to happen next? Well, she's going to go visit her father. And as soon as she gets into Great Falls, the cues are telling her, I need to find somebody, I know Charlie. Charlie will always hook me up with something. And sometimes he will hook me up as well. And so here she is, she's headed for the hospital, and every time she passes a bar that she used to go to get her fix, it's the cues are starting to click off. She doesn't even make it to the hospital. She doesn't even make it to the hospital. Her dad's in intensive care, the other brothers and sisters are there, the ex-wife is there trying to take care of him, and everybody wonders where she is. And for 2 days they look for her, they can't find her. Guess where she is? She's all juiced up on something, in the back room of somebody's house.
Or behind bars if she committed a crime.
Well, she doesn't have enough money to buy her stuff, so she starts out selling herself in order to get her first fix. But after that, now she needs more, so she writes a bad check. That's what she did. She got arrested for the bad check. She never saw her father. Her father died, and she never made it to the hospital. 10 days he was alive while she was in Great Falls. She never saw him. Everybody's looking for her. There were more people looking for her than there were people in his hospital. He didn't die alone, of course, but he died without seeing his daughter, who ran down there as soon as she found out that he was in the hospital. Anyway, not important. Or maybe it is. So we need to extinguish the cues, the people, the places, the things that trigger the use. Family therapy, group psychopharmacy, or residential treatment can be used. Instruction in relapse prevention and life management skills. Psychopharmacological strategies. Promotion of healthy lifestyles. You need to eat more vegetables. You need to eat more fruits. You need to stop eating so much red meat. You're going to kill yourself. Development of support and aftercare systems. The famous 12-step programs. And one of the programs, I think is step 5, is apologizing to all the people that you hurt. What'd I do?
Nothing.
Okay, are you sure?
Yeah.
Is it my fault?
No.
Is
I
it
just
we
lost something, so I told him to go look for it.
Okay.
So good, go ahead.
Okay. Is everything, how's the wind? Are you going to be okay in the truck? Right, that's what I was worried about. 12-step program. Step 5 is always calling people. I think it's step 5. You call people that you hurt in the past. And I told you I've had several people in my life that, including my second wife, who was an alcoholic. When she joined AA, of course, she called me on the telephone. And she told me, she apologized, and she said that she hoped she didn't hurt the kids. I hope it didn't hurt you. Will you help me make a baby? That kind of thing. That was interesting. Just send me some sperm so I could. She's going to have artificial insemination. I didn't do it. No, thank you. I'll pass. Tertiary programs result in decreased drug use or abstinence in 40 to 50% of the cases. 74% reduction in crime. 1,400,000 people receive treatment nationwide. 7 million people are estimated to need treatment nationwide. And of course, there are only about 1.4 million people are actually getting treatment at this time. I had a friend, I told you about my friend, went to treatment 24 times and it didn't take. And eventually, of course, he went up on the mountain and fasted. He went on a vision quest. And when he came down, he was sober. I know. All of that white man's medicine that they tried to pump into him, all of that artificial American Indian spirituality that they tried to harass him with while he was in treatment, none of it took. One time he was in treatment for 9 months. It still didn't take. And 4 days up on the mountain, the Great Spirit came down and cured him. But he had to be serious. The problem was he was never serious. Even though he was the police chief, and even though he had arrested man after man after man for DWI, for beating their wives, for murder because they were drunk. He said the most tragic thing that he ever saw was the guy that murdered his son, and he murdered his wife while he was drunk. They arrested him, they threw him in jail, and it was the next morning when he realized what he did. The man was suicidal. He was banging himself against the wall and against the bars, and they had to take him into the psych ward in order just to save his life. He said it was the saddest thing that he ever saw. But even that didn't cure him. He had 3 wives, he had 6 children, and he didn't take care of anybody. Nobody. It wasn't until he went up on the mountain that he got cured. Anyway, so some sad stories. Not all programs seek abstinence. Harm reduction programs recognize that recovery is difficult, and many will relapse before they are able to live their lives drug-free. We see that, just like I said, 24 times. This guy went to treatment 24 times. He needed to stay away from alcohol. He was on programs like this harm reduction programs. And he would take his first drink, and the next thing he knew, he was laid out drunk. Not from one drink, because he couldn't just drink one time. He said that when he took a drink, that he would black out almost right away. And he didn't know how much alcohol he was drinking. He would start out drinking having one drink with a full bottle of whiskey or vodka or gin. This guy drank everything. He drank lighter fuel. I mean, he was nuts. Anyway, yeah, and he used to brag about it too. So he would start out with a full bottle, and the next thing he knew, it was empty. He had blacked out. He had taken all of those drinks, or at least that's what he told us. Maybe he was just rationalizing. Anyway, this technique focuses on minimizing the personal and social problems caused by drugs. If you're an alcoholic, you need to stay away from it forever. If you drink one time, potentially you will relapse. If you watch the television show Mom, which is a kind of a fascinating show, it's about a group of recovering alcoholics or recovering drug addicts. It's really kind of fascinating. But 2 weeks ago, they had one of the individuals was replaced alcohol with food. And she got really fat. So she went to rehab, and when she went to rehab, she skinnied down, and of course she stayed off of her stuff. But then she came back, and she was supposed to live her own life. And here she is, this skinny lady. And they were telling her, well, you can go ahead and eat that donut, that's okay, as long as you only have one. But she ate that first donut. I mean, this is part of her addiction. She ate that first donut. The next thing she knows, she has drunk a whole bottle. Well, she didn't eat. She was drinking alcohol, because if she fed the addiction, any addiction, then she went back to drinking, and that's what happened. And this happened to her every day. Every day something would happen. She would have a plate of eggs, and the next thing she knows, she's drunk. She's had a whole bottle of vodka. Because she couldn't not, she had to stay away from things that she was addicted to. She was addicted to food, she was addicted to alcohol. She was also addicted to all the drugs, but of course they weren't available to her. Anyway, and she would end up at her maid's house. This is a very wealthy lady, so she'd end up at her maid's house, and of course her maid hates her because she's not only the boss, she's also a mean boss. So she'd end up at the maid's house, and everybody's going, "Why is she here?" You know, she's this Mexican lady, cursing at her in Spanish, which is always funny. And of course, she can't speak Spanish. Everybody else can.
I've
So-
been in that situation.
So you can, what are we talking about? Three harm reduction programs, needle exchange programs to reduce the spread of HIV and hepatitis C, bleach distribution programs to reduce the spread of HIV and hepatitis, and legal drug substitution for illegal drugs. Methadone for heroin is the one that we talk about the most. Harm reduction programs have also proposed some controversial ideas. They accept the fact that people will experiment with drugs and they want to educate them to use drugs responsibly. Just use it responsibly. You can use all the drugs you want, but oh no, you can't. You can only use drugs responsibly. Decriminalizing or legalizing illegal drugs. There are people out there that say, you know, we could solve our deficit problem in the United States if we just legalized drugs. All drugs, heroin, crystal meth. And if we taxed them, we would be able to control them. Just like we were able to control alcohol and marijuana in Colorado and Washington. Does that work? Could that possibly work? Let's legalize heroin. I know. Then they wouldn't have to go to the doctor and get oxycodone or hydrocodone or OxyContin. They would just be able to, go down to their local pharmacy and get heroin so that they could shoot up. Wouldn't that be perfect? At least we'd be able to tax it.
Plus you'll have an increase of basically in all these isolated areas that will be making their own.
Oh, there you go, that's good. Bootlegging, that's against the law. We know that that's against the law. So what is more important, people's lives or money?
Yeah.
It's money? Okay. Is it money or is it people's lives?
Money.
Of course it's money. We are a capitalist nation, and money is the most important thing. We don't care about dead people. Well, unless it's my relative that's the dead person, then I care. As long as it's your relative, I don't care. Some of the most lucrative advertising on television is advertising for alcoholic beverages. Before 1996, hard liquor was not advertised on television, only beer. Before 1996. It was fun. Watching television, it was beer commercial after beer commercial after beer commercial. Back then we had lots and lots of different beers. Now we have 3. We have Coors, we have Millers, and we have Budweiser. And that's pretty much it. The rest of them are specialty beers. You can only get in certain places. Coors used to be a specialty beer that you could only get around Golden, Colorado. It was only west of the Mississippi. They never sold it east of the Mississippi. Very, very strange. And we used to see beer commercial after beer commercial after beer commercial. We used to see cigarette commercial after cigarette commercial after cigarette commercial. So in between all of the television shows, instead of when they took a break, what we saw was people having a really good time drinking that really good-looking beer and smoking cigarettes. So what were our children learning? Well, they were learning if you want to watch Father Knows Best, then the best way to be happy for the rest of your life is to smoke cigarettes and drink beer. It's perfect. Now, of course, we have hard liquor advertisements on television. The idea from the temperance argument of the 19th century was that replacing hard liquor with beer would reduce drunkenness and the destruction of alcohol. And it worked. Actually, we have less cirrhosis, we have less problems with alcohol than they do in Canada. And Canada has never pushed beer. They've always just had alcohol. They didn't go through prohibition. So their drinking problem in north of the border is a lot worse than it is in the United States. But they would say that it's not as bad because they're more realistic about drinking. We are too puritanistic in the United States. We're such Puritans that we don't know how to drink. So when we drink, we binge drink. When they drink up there, they drink all the time. And they're used to it. I told you about the softball team that came down. And as long as they were drinking moderately, they were a pretty damn good team. That night, however, something happened. I don't know what they were celebrating, but they all got snockered. And they played like crap. Oh man, we kicked the holy hell out of them, which I enjoyed a lot. Which I thought was fair, because I played on an Indian softball team, and here's these damn Canadians coming down. And of course, Canadians don't really treat Indians very well, and so I thought that it was only right that we kick the holy shit out of those guys. You know, let's do that wounded knee thing again, but let's reverse the process, and we'll do that to the Canadians. Anyway, it was a lot of fun, and my team won. So what do I care? But they were drunk. They were such a mess. And this one guy passed out drunk right in front of his tent, and the side of his face. Of course, he couldn't get up, and nobody was thinking about moving. The side of his face blistered. I mean, it was hot, and his face just blistered. The other side of his face was white as that piece of paper. But this side of his face was blistered red. I think it was a mess. He looked funny. You know, half of his face was red and the other half was white. he looked like Harley Quinn or something. Okay, what are we talking about? However, more people die from cirrhosis of the liver caused by beer than cirrhosis caused by hard liquor. That's in the United States, not in Canada, of course. Damage done by legal drugs cause more damage to society than illegal drugs. Alcohol, tobacco, prescription drugs do more damage than anything else. Advertising for these drugs brings new users into the fold every year, so it's advertising. The problem is we can fix people, and that's good. We're fixing people. But the problem is there's more people that are joining the ranks of the drunk. And because of that, it's a never-ending process. Don't worry, you'll never run out of a job. Facts to remember about prevention: there are no quick fixes. Unfortunately, prevention will never be complete because there will always be new potential users to convince. Prevention campaigns become progressively more difficult in time because they have already reacted to the easy sells. So as you promote these things, the individuals that aren't really addicts, you've already taken care of all those people. It's the really severe addicts that you're dealing with now. So it gets harder as time goes by. No single approach has been shown to work consistently. Legalization of medical marijuana will make it more and more difficult to control all drugs. With legalization in several different states, not just medical marijuana, we're going to have a mess. It's going to be a mess in the United States. When the doctors started prescribing harder and harder medications, opiates, to take care of pain, we had no clue that we would have this opiate epidemic. And it's the medical community's fault. It's their fault. You can lay the blame on the AMA. And they should be willing, these are doctors, so they don't admit anything. But they should admit that they are the ones that did it. And we're going to see the same thing with legalized marijuana. We can go back to the year that Colorado legalized marijuana. And from that point forward, we started having all of this extra problems that we didn't even anticipate. Why? Because we've got all these other individuals who are saying, dude, everything's going to be cool, marijuana's not addictive, nobody's ever overdosed on marijuana, which is true. Nobody's ever overdosed on marijuana, but now all of a sudden we're going to have all kinds of interesting problems. Our scores. Nobody's going to be able to do math in the United States because their short-term memory is such crap. We're just going to see all kinds of interesting problems. I can't anticipate it. I'm going to be dead. You guys are going to have to take care of it. I apologize. Some idiots in Colorado legalize marijuana. Idiots in California legalize marijuana. And so you guys are going to have to deal with this thing. I apologize. But I blame Coloradans and Californians and Washingtonians and Oregonians and Alaskans and people from New York. When we see descriptions, depictions of drug addicts in the media, they are often portrayed as weak, as bad, as stupid, crazy, immoral, poor, and disenfranchised. The problem is, of course, since we see these individuals as all of these negative things, we don't realize that the president of Amazon may be a drug addict. We don't recognize it because we don't see him as weak, bad, stupid, crazy, immoral, poor, or disenfranchised. The reality is it can happen to anybody, not just the lowest of the lowly, because that's the way we see drug addicts. We see them on television this way. 1/3 of the homeless have drug or alcohol problems. This only represents about 5% of the addicts in the United States. The rest of them are housewives. The rest of them are factory workers. The rest of them are farmers. They're CEOs of companies, unfortunately. So, and the problem is, of course, people paint pictures, and we believe those pictures. Once upon a time, Ronald Reagan was trying to be elected president, so he decided, and he wanted to reform welfare in the United States. So he painted a picture of what people on welfare look like. Guess what they look like? They didn't look like us. So it was easy for us to vote for Ronald Reagan because the people that he was trying to take care of didn't look like us. He painted the picture that they were black, that they were utilizing the system to get money out of the system, that they were making babies in order to get more money out of the system. That's the picture that he painted. But the reality is that most people on welfare in the United States are white. But did he ever talk about the white people on welfare? No. He just kept painting this picture, this picture that people saw as negative. And even to this day, that was 30 years ago. That was almost 40 years ago that he's painting this picture. Longer ago than that. It was 1980. That's 35. That's almost 40 years. So anyway, he's painting this picture. And even today, the conservatives will still paint that picture. This is the picture that comes up in their mind when they think of people on welfare. And the reality is that most people on welfare in the United States are white. And most people, he claimed that these people were on welfare for life, and he wanted to stop that. Well, most of these people are on welfare for a year, and then they go off. They're using it as a thing that they can fall back on. The truth that whites are the most likely to have either a drug or alcohol problem. The truth is that whites are most likely to have even a drug problem. But if somebody were going to paint a picture, would they paint a picture of a white person? An attractive white person, or an unattractive white person? We're all awfully attractive. Are there any pictures of unattractive white people? African Americans are just as likely as whites to have a drug problem, but the least likely to have an alcohol problem, which is really kind of interesting. African Americans are not real big drinkers. But you see them on television with those great big bottles of beer. Those, I don't know what they call them. The 40s? 40s, thank you. Okay. I don't know how you knew that, but you watch television.
Watch those gangsters.
Yeah, you watch those gangster movies.
Yeah, they're always hanging out down the streets. And
drinking 40s. Okay. Hispanics are the least likely to have a drug problem. As interesting as that is, even though Donald Trump talks about that one gang from El Salvador. He claims that they're all drug addicts and drug pushers. People, I'm sorry? MS-13? MS-13, yeah. Whatever that means. Yeah. People in low-income areas are less likely to receive treatment and more likely to be incarcerated for their drug use. More affluent people are more likely to receive treatment and probation. So if I'm rich, and actually this is a trick that lawyers will use, they'll dress them up really nice and get their hair cut. If they have shaved their head, they'll make them grow their hair out. They try to cover up all their tattoos if they have tattoos. But this is a trick. And what they try to do is, the better that they look, the more likely that they won't be thrown in jail, that they will get treatment and probation.
They give them a halo.
Yeah, they try to give them a halo, exactly. But what can you do for somebody that's African American? Can you paint them white? Will that work? How do you make them look more affluent? Is there anything you can do for a black guy? How often do you see on television, especially in Albuquerque, because that's a television I get right now, but how often do you see an African American in a prison jumpsuit? He goes to court in a prison jumpsuit. What is the image that you get of that? And then if you see some white guys, like the policeman who murdered that other policeman, he's always dressed to the nines. He's got his hair, it's nice and slicked back, and it's short. He looks affluent. He looks like, this guy couldn't have murdered somebody. And then you see that black guy that shot the cop off the motorcycle, and he's got a big, heavy beard, and he's not only in a prison suit, but it's unsnapped all the way down to his navel. He's got this dirty undershirt on. He looks wild walking out of the courtroom. Yeah, all of these things are really important as far as judges and as far as juries are concerned. 53% of the individuals in prison for drug crimes are African Americans, even though they don't use as many drugs as white people do. But still, 53% of the people in prisons are black. 26% of those in prison for drug crimes are white. Even though they are the majority people, they are the people that use drugs more than anybody else. Among the highest paid occupation in the United States, physicians, they are as likely to be addicted as the general population, though they are more likely to be addicted to prescription drugs. So they get them for free. So is that okay? Is it okay for them to be? Members of Mensa and gifted high school students have high rates of addiction. In order to get into Mensa, you have to have an IQ over 140. I think it's 140. They may have raised it, but it's 100. It was 140. So these individuals are just as likely to be addicted as anybody else. Members of the clergy have high rates of alcoholism, especially Catholic priests. I hate to pick on Catholics. I hope nobody is offended. I've had lots of friends who were Catholic priests, actually. Most of them were assholes. Maybe I'm the asshole. Maybe that's it. Maybe they were nice guys, and no, that can't be it. While addiction rates fluctuate with attempts to curtail use, over the last 40 years, the age of addicts has declined with the age of first use. Between 1991 and 2005, the number of 8th through 10th graders who use marijuana increased 60%. Juvenile arrestees testing positive for drugs other than alcohol ranged from 48 to 65% in 2005. It is estimated that 18.6% of infants are exposed to alcohol in the womb. Is that all? Just 18.6%? 4.5% of fetuses are exposed to cocaine. 17.4% of fetuses are exposed to tobacco. And as I told you, I had a great nephew, and this just breaks my heart, that was born addicted to heroin.
I think you probably see the 17.4 is probably would be here.
Oh, here?
It's amazing. You see expectant mothers basically chewing tobacco here.
Something I've noticed here, you guys don't smoke as much as they do up north. As a matter of fact, if you guys smoke, you don't claim that it's your holy right to do that. But up north, you see somebody smoking and you try to tell them about how bad tobacco is. No, this is connect. This is our holy stuff. Yeah, right. You're smoking pipe tobacco in a cigarette. What does that mean? What is that stuff? Anyway, it's people in Oklahoma, and there's a large percentage of American Indians in Oklahoma. Number 2 leading state for smoking tobacco. Fetal alcohol syndrome is the 3rd most common birth defect and the leading cause of intellectual disability in the United States. You guys complain about the alcohol on this reservation, but the level of drinking here is nothing compared to what it is up north. On all the reservations. Blackfeet, Pearl, and they all just drink like fish. I know. practically everybody you run into is a recovered alcoholic. At one point, they were telling us that it's 80% alcoholism. Fort Belknap, where I was, and I didn't know any, well, I knew people who drank, but most of the people that I knew were recovered alcoholics or recovering alcoholics. So the reality is, despite the fact that it looks bad here, it's not as bad as it is at the moment. So when we're dealing with this, and we do need to deal with this, when we're dealing with this, one of the things to remember is that possibly if you could come up with a way that helps people here, maybe we can transfer it up there. Maybe. Of course, their ceremonies are completely different, right, Johnny? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Johnny knows. He's been up there. He's powwow with those people up there. And they do powwow well, don't they? Don't they have a good time?
Yeah.
Okay. It's the 49ing afterwards that is the problem. They don't drink while they're at the powwow. Usually. Well, not all the time. It's afterwards. Drug use during pregnancy, is it time? No, I got fine. Drug use during pregnancy can create nutritional and obstetrical complications, anemia, sexually transmitted diseases, diabetes, high blood pressure, neurological damage, weakened immune systems, poor nutrition, hepatitis C exposure, endocarditis, HIV, and AIDS exposure, of course, during drug use. 80% of infants born with HIV in the United States were born to mothers who were IV drug users, or the partners of men who were IV drug users. Gay men usually are relatively exclusively gay, and they don't have sex with women because they don't find women attractive. Bisexuality in the United States is not really that common, as odd as that may seem, but of course women will have sex with men who use drugs because it's cool. And women want to be with cool men, right? The cooler you are, the more likely you want to be with that guy. That's why Edison and I have no problems finding, yeah. I wear Hawaiian shirts, you wear your Dallas Cowboys paraphernalia or your regalia or whatever.
Would that also include, I don't know, somebody who's like really quiet, but they'll wear like, let me see, how can I explain?
I don't know if that, well, it all depends on what
black, like the black leather jacket, like so, and just this, hardly speaks, you know. What about that?
I don't know. Does that sound cool to you?
I don't know.
Okay.
At
If
one
it's cool
point
to you, I guess it's cool.
At one point, I guess I thought it was.
One of the things I've noticed around here is almost everybody wears black clothes. Haven't figured that one out yet.
No, it's like a whole like a black jacket with white T-shirt
And black pants and black shoes, and I'm thinking.
and shades like a
Yeah, it sounds cool.
sunglasses.
Exactly, it sounds cool. But the question is, I mean, this is not just the kids. It's not just the high school guys. It's the college kids. It's the 30-year-olds, the 40-year-olds. Everybody wears black. Everybody does. They wear dark clothes all the time, and I just can't figure it out. Unless you're a Dallas Cowboy fan and you wear
I love black clothes.
cowboy blue.
Yeah.
Blue.
Black cap.
There we go. Is that black?
Shirt.
Oh, that is black. Well, it's not. It's navy blue.
No, it's black.
It's black.
I'm gonna have to put on my glasses.
Let me open the blinds here.
Have you seen a navy uniform? Yeah, it's black.
I do have a navy blue one as well.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe that's what I was thinking. Okay. The Navy wears uniforms that they call navy blue, which is actually black. Navy people, they can't tell colors. They had problems with their crayons when they were children.
Well, I'm sporting my
It's black.
my pencil bag.
It's black.
See?
Pregnant addicts often live chaotic lifestyles that don't afford time or the wherewithal to seek or accept prenatal care or medical intervention, and of course, once they give birth, now we got a problem. When the addict is an adolescent, the individual is at greater risk and even less likely to seek treatment Other problems are likely because of her physical, emotional, and behavioral immaturity. It's teenagers that are the most likely to give birth to an addicted baby, unfortunately. And this is a real tragedy. Biggest problem is getting them to go to the doctor because they don't, I don't know, are they in denial about the fact that they're pregnant and they have a baby growing in their belly? Are they so selfish that they don't think of the child, they just think of themselves? I don't know, but we see this in teenagers more than anybody else.
You see that a lot around here as well.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
I think for the young ladies here, it's more of fear of anxiety, simply because they know that in most traditional families, there's supposed to be certain steps in order to basically get to that level of having a spouse and then creating a family and basically doing it from there.
So would you say that in this case, tradition is actually getting in the way of taking care of the child and the mother?
Not necessarily. It's kind of like
They feel rejected.
yeah, it's like a part of growing up in life
Right.
as compared to learning all the culture and stuff like that when you're growing up. But this day and age, a lot of it's kind of veered off and everybody's kind of getting away from the traditional aspects of things and they're moving more in the Western philosophy and stuff like that. So they've adapted to like what we were talking about later. The new trends, basically. You have the internet, TV,
Right.
different types of music, the
Right.
lyrics,
Exactly.
different cultures.
And it's changing.
Yeah.
Up north, if at the 12-year-old or 13-year-old gets pregnant, they celebrate. All babies are blessings. I know, all babies are blessings. That's what they feel. So you've got these junior high girls that have 2 kids. I know, but you see it. But the positive thing is they don't reject them. The culture doesn't reject them. All babies are blessings. That's the concept. And it makes it less likely that they will hide their pregnancy, that they will not take care of themselves during the pregnancy. And that's a positive.
Here they used to frown on that. But over the last, probably 20 years,